Hey everyone, welcome to Beyond the Gates. I'm Alessio, and I'm so excited to have you here. If you love Beyond the Gates, then you're in the right place. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a video. Alright, let's dive right in. Is Vanessa sleeping with her husband's killer? I don't even know where to begin with this story. It feels like everything in my life, every single decision I've made in the past few months, has been crashing down all at once, like dominoes falling in a line I can't stop. If you've ever had one of those moments where you're standing in the middle of chaos and you suddenly realize just how far off track your life has gone, then you'll understand exactly what I mean. For me, that moment came in Puerto Rico. I had gone there with Joey. Yes, that Joey. The man who was never supposed to mean anything to me. I told myself it was just a distraction, just an escape, just a break from the constant weight of my marriage, my responsibilities, and the complicated mess that had become my daily life. Joey had this way of making me feel alive again, of pulling me into his orbit and making me forget everything else, even if just for a few stolen nights. But in the middle of our so-called getaway, while we were laughing in a hotel room, tangled in sheets, acting like we were 20 again, and without a care in the world, my phone started buzzing. I ignored it at first because I didn't want the outside world creeping in. But it wouldn't stop. Call after call, vibration after vibration, until finally I reached over and saw Jacob's name on the screen. And that's when my entire world shattered. The words didn't even make sense at first. Jacob's voice was tight, serious, and uncharacteristically soft. "Vanessa," he said, "I need you to sit down." My heart dropped before he even finished the sentence. You never want someone to tell you to sit down. Nothing good ever follows that. Then came the blow. Doug, my husband, the father of my twins, had been killed in a car accident. I swear to you, I couldn't breathe. My throat closed up, my chest felt like it was caving in, and my legs actually buckled. Joey tried to steady me, but the second I realized who I was standing next to, guilt slammed into me harder than the news itself. Doug was gone. The man I had promised to love and stay faithful to, the man who had built a family with me, had died while I was in another man's bed. I collapsed right there on the floor of that hotel room, sobbing into my hands. Every thought that ran through my head was tangled up with shame. How could I ever face my children? How could I look them in the eye and tell them their father was gone, knowing that in the exact moment of his death, I was betraying him? It was unbearable. And then something even darker hit me, a thought I wish I could erase, but it stuck, and once it took root in my brain, it wouldn't leave. What if Joey had something to do with Doug's death? I know it sounds paranoid, crazy even, but grief and guilt do strange things to your mind. Doug's death wasn't just sudden, it was strange. Jacob told me he'd been speeding down the road, drunk, even though Doug wasn't the type to drink and drive. He was careful, always. If he'd had too much, he'd call someone. He'd wait it out. He wasn't reckless like that. And yet, there he was, dead on the side of the road in what was being called an accident. That word didn't sit right with me. Joey was calm, too calm. When I turned to him, tears streaming down my face, and asked if he knew anything, he just shook his head, his voice smooth and steady, telling me not to think like that. But the more he told me to stop, the more my mind screamed that there was something he wasn't saying. Because Joey had always been a little too close to danger, a little too familiar with people who got what they wanted by cutting corners, by pulling strings, by making inconvenient people disappear. And here I was, in his bed, at the exact moment my husband died. Coincidence? Or something darker? That was the thought I carried back home with me, the weight pressing down on my chest as I boarded the plane, as I rehearsed how I would tell my children, as I tried to figure out how to live in a world where Doug no longer existed. The first time I saw the twins after getting the news, I completely broke. They looked at me with wide, innocent eyes, waiting for me to explain why Daddy wasn't coming home. I couldn't even form the words. How do you tell two children that the person they look up to, the person they expect to be there for every birthday, every bedtime story, every scraped knee, is just gone? I didn't know what to say. All I could do was hold them, clutch them so tightly that they started to squirm, and sob until my throat was raw. They cried with me, confused and heartbroken, their little voices calling out for a father who would never walk through the door again. And all I could think was, if they ever knew the truth about where I was, about who I was with, they'd never forgive me. That night, when the house was quiet and the kids were finally asleep, I sat alone in the dark, staring at the wall. I replayed everything in my head, over and over. Joey's calmness, Jacob's hesitation, Marcel's shrug when asked about Doug's drinking. Drunk makes you stupid, he had said, as if that explained everything. But it didn't explain anything. Not to me. Because I knew Doug. And I knew something about this wasn't right. And as much as I hated myself for even asking the question, the thought wouldn't go away. Was I sleeping with my husband's killer? Vanessa's guilt and the twisted web of lies. The days after Doug's death were like moving through a thick fog. Everything was muted, the colors of the world dulled, the sounds distant. I went through the motions because I had to. I had to feed the twins, get them to school, answer Jacob's questions, and pretend to be functional. But inside, I was a whirlwind of grief, guilt, and suspicion. Jacob came over almost every day, ostensibly to help with paperwork, but I knew it was more than that. He wanted to make sure I was okay, or maybe he wanted to make sure something else didn't go wrong. He didn't push me too hard, but his presence was a constant reminder that Doug's death wasn't just a headline in the paper. It was real, it was permanent, and someone needed answers. One afternoon, while Jacob was working on the accident report, I found myself staring at my phone. Joey had called again. I debated answering, knowing that every ring sent a shiver down my spine. Finally, I picked up. "Vanessa," he said, his voice calm but almost too calm. "How are you holding up?" I couldn't even form words. My voice cracked, barely a whisper. I don't know, Joey. I don't know what to do. I don't know if I should even. I can't. He interrupted, smooth as ever. Hey, look at me. I'm here. None of this is your fault. You didn't. I mean, it was an accident, right? I wanted to scream at him. Was it really? Or did you have something to do with it? But the words didn't come out. I hung up, trembling, and sank to the floor. It wasn't just Joey that made me feel like the world was spinning out of control. Marcel was involved too. That man had always had a way of keeping secrets, of twisting stories until the truth felt optional. He called Joey after Jacob left to investigate another case and said, almost casually, "Everything went smoothly. As far as the world is concerned, Doug's death was an accident." My stomach dropped. My chest tightened. I realized then that I wasn't just dealing with grief. I was standing in the middle of a lie so tangled and so deliberate that I didn't even know who to trust anymore. And yet, life didn't pause. The twins still needed me. They still asked questions about their father, about why he wasn't home, about why Mommy cried so much. And every answer I gave them was partial, vague, a careful dance around the truth. Daddy's gone, sweeties. He had an accident. He loved you very much. But inside, my mind screamed, and I wasn't there for him. I failed him. I failed you. Meanwhile, Danny and Andre's story was unfolding on its own messy trajectory. I had always known their lives were complicated, but this was next-level drama. When I finally had a moment to breathe and catch up, I learned about the hangover morning in Las Vegas, the heated discussions about divorce, and the public humiliation that Andre faced from the Dupree clan. Nicole had been trying to mediate. She called Andre, insisting he meet her at Vernon and Anita's place. There, he was confronted by everyone, the entire family expressing their disappointment and frustration. Andre tried to take responsibility, to shield Danny, but Nicole wasn't buying it. "Danny's not the only one who's had her life blown up," she spat. "The rest of us would like a break from the endless drama." I could hear it in my mind, like a recording. The tension, the stifled anger, the frustration boiling over in every word. It was the kind of scene you see in movies, but watching it play out in real life, knowing some of these people personally, it cut deeper. Andre wanted to do right by Danny, but in that house, right and wrong didn't seem to matter anymore. All that mattered was who got hurt, who got blamed, and who survived the chaos. Then came Danny's shocking decision. Bill, ever the hypocrite, had been lecturing Haley about how women supposedly take longer to move on from trauma than men. I laughed bitterly to myself because, watching Danny, I realized Bill didn't understand anything about human emotion. She was resilient, fiercely independent, and unapologetic, qualities that infuriated him when they didn't fit his narrative. When Danny posted about her marriage to Andre, Bill erupted. I could almost picture his face, veins pulsing, fists clenched. How could she do this to the kids? He probably yelled. And Haley, ever the peacemaker, tried to calm him down, worried that his rage would become destructive. 2 minutes later, Bill was at Danny's door, demanding answers, demanding justification, demanding control over a situation he hadn't earned. Danny's response was nothing short of shocking. She suggested that she and Andre remain married a little longer. A subtle rebellion, yes, but also a declaration that her life, her choices, were hers alone. That moment, that defiance, that clarity, reminded me of something I had forgotten about myself. In the fog of guilt and grief, I had lost sight of who I was. I had been bending to everyone else's expectations, Doug, the twins, Jacob, Marcel, even Joey, without considering my own voice, my own sense of agency. Danny reminded me that sometimes, even in the middle of chaos, you have to assert yourself. But asserting yourself isn't simple, especially when your world has been turned upside down by death, betrayal, and secrets. Later that night, I found myself standing in the twins' room again. They were asleep, but the sound of their breathing, the rise and fall of their chests, felt like a lifeline. I kissed their foreheads, whispered promises I wasn't sure I could keep, and for a moment, allowed myself to imagine a life beyond grief. Could I forgive myself? Could I navigate the twisted web of lies surrounding Doug's death? Could I ever trust Joey or anyone again? I didn't know, but I knew I had to try.
Because the children needed me.
Because Doug deserved better than a mother consumed by guilt. And because, deep down, I realized that surviving this, whatever this was, meant facing the truth, no matter how painful.